What's up guys, Vress here with some thoughts on how dungeons are shaping up in Ashes of Creation. Now if you haven't heard about Ashes of Creation or you just haven't been following it, then it's basically an upcoming MMO that has been making a lot of big promises. The developers have basically told us that it's going to be the next big thing, it's going to be the MMO that we've all been waiting for. Now I don't know if it's going to be all that, but I really hope it is, and I know a lot of people are hoping that as well. Personally, I think that the dungeon footage we're about to check out in this video is a solid indicator the game is on track, or at least I hope it is. Let's check it out together and see what we think. One of the first things you might notice is that it does look kind of blurry at the moment, and I don't know if that's just how it looks in its pre-alpha state or if they tried to record on a PC that couldn't quite handle the game and the recording software at the same time. I suspect it might be that because I've experienced the same thing myself in the past. Either way, it doesn't really matter at this stage, and despite this village actually looks really cool. It actually looks very fleshed out considering that the game's currently in pre-alpha. I really like the lighting effects they've used here in particular, and how these petals are falling from the trees is pretty cool too. They're just some really nice little touches to have. We've actually been told that this is a level 3 village, and what that means in Ashes terms is that the players themselves have actually worked together and their actions have allowed this village to level up. This is actually a feature of the node system, and while we're not going to talk about that in depth here, the basic principle is that players are able to do different things, turn in different quests, harvest different resources, whatever it might be, contribute to whatever the town needs, and then the town will start to level up. The really cool thing here is that now this settlement is hit level 3, it's actually opened up a brand new quest, and this quest is going to take the party to a dungeon. The quest itself seems pretty simple, they just need to get down into the dungeon, retrieve this relic, and then bring it back to the quest giver. As soon as they leave the safety of the village, they encounter this weird looking walking meatball thing on the road, and it doesn't really give them much trouble as a party, but I expect that one-on-one it might be a little more threatening. One of the key principles of the node system, and this one actually relates to dungeons, is the fact that outside of the node, if it's level 3, then technically the enemies out there should also be scaled to that kind of level. So if you were at a level 1 settlement, you'd expect to encounter a less powerful enemy than if you're outside a level 3 settlement. From what I understand, this also relates to features such as dungeons that surround the settlement, so a much more powerful dungeon might become available once the settlement levels up. The second group they come across here seems to give them a bit more to think about, which is interesting because they haven't actually reached the dungeon yet, and I do wonder what would happen if someone encountered this group one-on-one. If the whole intention here is that you might need a party and to work with other players to even be able to get to the dungeon entrance, then that's kind of cool because I kind of miss that whole idea of needing to work with the community and work with other players in order to even achieve things in the open world. Obviously these guys are the developers as well, and they're going to know all of this stuff inside out, so these groups might actually be a little more challenging than it seems when these guys are doing it. They've probably done it like 100 times before, so it might be a lot more difficult when we come along and have no idea what we're doing. Now this is where it gets interesting because they don't actually have any sort of marker on the map telling them where to find the dungeon entrance. So what happens here is the ranger has to use his utility skill, and that utility skill is going to allow him to see these footprints, and those footprints lead them to the dungeon. Now to me this is an awesome addition. I love the fact that there's that whole sort of class identity thing creeping in here already before we've even reached the dungeon entrance. When the party does arrive at the dungeon entrance, the first thing that catches my eye is that green mist surrounding it. It makes it look interesting, it makes you think twice about going in there. When you get a bit closer and you look at the particle effects themselves, it does look a bit basic, it does look a bit unfinished, but presumably that's because it is unfinished and this is just a placeholder asset, but nonetheless it's a cool thing to have there. The best thing about it is that when the players enter it, they actually become affected by it. It's not just an aesthetic thing, it's actually damaging the players, it's choking them. This effect isn't actually removed until the cleric casts his utility spell, which clears up the toxic fog and lets the players proceed safely. Once again here we're seeing another unique class mechanic that's just making the dungeon feel like it's unique from different players' perspectives. One thing I notice here is that the party hasn't gone through any kind of instance portal, so that makes me wonder, if there's no instance portal, does that leave this place open to being zerged? Now if that is the case, then it would really spoil the whole dungeon experience for the 5-man party, so I don't really know the answer to that, but I wonder if any of you guys do. If you do know the answer to how they're dealing with that and preventing any kind of zerging, then let me know in the comments down below. I'd be really interested to know. I'm not sure exactly what the tank's up to here. He doesn't really seem to be doing a very good job of keeping the bad guys off his team, but I do like the fact that both the tank and the healer actually managed to die in this fight, and especially considering this is just a trash pack, and considering that these guys have been developing the game, so they must really know these fights inside out already. This is really good, and I do hope it's a theme that the dungeons in Ashes are actually quite difficult, quite challenging, because there's nothing worse than face roll dungeons. I find them so boring, and we've seen that a bit too much, I think, in recent titles. In my opinion, the big challenge is actually keeping the dungeons hard rather than making them hard to start with, so it'll be interesting to see how they manage to do that over the months after launch. So here the party are approaching the first boss, and as far as the aesthetics go, the boss itself and the area around it look really cool. I love the whole fire thing that's going on here. In terms of mechanics, this boss is just basically hitting harder as he takes more damage, and in this case they seem to be able to just tank and spank him pretty much. However, if they decide to increase the difficulty here, I wonder if other tactics will start to come into play. For example, maybe you'd end up kiting the boss, or perhaps you would be trying to DPS it down really fast before the healers essentially ran out of mana because of all the damage the tank was taking. It'll be interesting to see what kind of tactics developed based on how difficult they actually end up making the dungeon. I'm also really glad to see that they got rid of that horrible timing bar thing where you had to hit your abilities on a certain time on the bar. That looked awful, and I'm really glad to see that taken out of the game. At this point, the party have reached the gates of Moria, or what looks like them, so speak friend and enter. The cool thing here is that that isn't actually far from the truth. Again, we're seeing this class-specific utility thing come into play, because here the gate is magically locked, and for it to be open, the mage then has to use his class utility to be able to open the magical lock. Again, that's really cool. It's just given that sort of unique flavor for each class in the dungeon. So as you can see, the ranger runs off here, and there doesn't really seem to be any real consequence to him doing that, which does seem a little odd. To be honest, I'd like to see more of a sort of level of challenge where if you stray from the party, and especially if you pull a group of enemies like that, then you're probably going to get stomped. Otherwise, it's just going to feel a little bit too easy. Then again, he does run off, so maybe he just got lucky. And by the way, that's such a typical hunter thing to do. Well, ranger in this case, but it's kind of the same thing really. Judging by this, it also looks like there's more to worry about than just monsters in this dungeon, though that did look very much like he jumped off on purpose just to troll the party. I actually love how much the developers actually seem to be enjoying playing their own game. That's a real good sign for me. Obviously this is a passion project for them, so I think they're creating the game that they want to play as well, which is really cool. Obviously make sure you check the full length version of this out on the Ashes of Creation YouTube channel, because you can get their commentary there and it is actually quite fun. Some of these trash packs do seem a little too easy, but again, I doubt this is the final tuning. I very much doubt that actually is almost certainly going to have a lot of changes before this dungeon gets anywhere near launch, but hopefully they're just going to present a bit more of a challenge going forward. It'd also be nice to see the dungeons being a bit more populated, because they're coming towards the end now and we haven't really encountered that many enemies. I'm not saying it should be packed out like a WoW dungeon necessarily, but maybe just a bit more going on in there would be good. So like I said, the party are now about to encounter the final boss, and it is one ugly looking boss, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's actually scaring the crap out of me. It's obviously like the queen of the meatball spider things that we met outside. The mechanics of this fight seem pretty basic. Again, I'm not sure where this dungeon fits in actually, whether it's a sort of early game dungeon or a later game dungeon. I would assume early game, because the mechanics are, like I said, quite basic, and they seem suited to the level of a player who's just starting to learn about boss mechanics rather than one that's looking for a big challenge after playing the game for a while. In this particular fight, they have to basically kill these adds as fast as possible before they manage to heal the boss and essentially prolong the fight. Once again, this is still all in development, and for all we know, they're going to add another 6 mechanics to this boss and make it the hardest thing ever, so who knows, we don't know what's going to happen yet, but so far I think it looks pretty cool. So following that fight, the party reaches the end of the dungeon, and now they can grab the relic, take a handy shortcut back to the village and hand it in. So after watching this, I do feel that Intrepid are taking dungeons in the right direction. There's nothing revolutionary or that innovative going on here, but we are seeing some really solid all-round sort of dungeon experiences starting to take shape. I especially liked all the little class-specific mechanics that were sprinkled in all over the place, like the hunter tracking and the mage opening the door and the cleric clearing the toxic fog. All that stuff was kind of cool, and it makes it feel like each class has its own unique dungeon experience. Like I said, it did feel that the dungeon was a little undertuned and underpopulated in places, and the combat isn't exactly up to that much right now. It doesn't look particularly exciting. It doesn't look bad, it just looks like pretty bog standard MMO combat, and hopefully they'll improve on that quite a lot before launch and give us something maybe a little bit more exciting there. Overall, I'm taking this preview as a sign of solid progress, and hopefully as a sign that Ashes of Creation isn't just the latest hype train. It'd definitely be nice to see Intrepid Studios put their money where their mouth is and deliver for us the next big thing in the MMO space. Anyway, you've heard my thoughts on dungeons in Ashes of Creation, and I look forward to hearing yours in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you consider subscribing to my channel for regular content. You can expect weekly MMO and RPG videos on my YouTube channel, and I'm thinking of starting Twitch soon as well, so you can check me out on there. Also, we have an active Discord community where we chat about this kind of stuff all the time, and you're very welcome to join us there. I'll put a link in the description down below. Anyway, take care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.